Welcome to this special episode of the 1600 Sessions. I'm Stuart McLaurin, president of the White House Historical Association. You know, thousands of people traverse Lafayette Park every day to catch a glimpse of the White House. And the White House Historical Association occupies 3 townhomes on the west side of Lafayette Square. It's truly special to look out my window every day and see visitors to the park enjoying the president's neighborhood. This summer, on First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy's 92nd birthday, the association dedicated 3 wayside markers on the north end of Lafayette Park where 8th Street meets Black Lives Matter Plaza. The panels tell the stories of enslaved and free laborers who built the White House while living and working in the park, First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy's saving of Lafayette Square, and the park as the nation's stage for demonstrations since the suffragists in 1917. This September, we unveiled an audio component of these waysides that makes this rich story even more accessible for visitors to the park. You can see and listen to these panels virtually on our website at whitehousehistory.org/wayside. Today, I'm honored to be joined by the 2 narrators for this project, Hillary West and Royce Dickerson. Hillary is the Executive Director for Federal Government Relations at J.P. Morgan Chase, and Royce is an MBA candidate at the University of Alabama's Manderson Graduate School of Business. Hillary and Royce, thank you very much for being with me today.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
So I had the pleasure of being with you down at Lafayette Square, where we played for the very first time that audio of your 2 voices, bringing to life those incredible stories of the enslaved persons who worked and lived on that plot of land, the work of Mrs. Kennedy to save the park when it was threatened with historic changes, and then to the park as a place for demonstration since the suffragists in 1917. You brought voice to all of those people. Tell us what that felt like to you and why that experience was meaningful. Hillary?
Sure. I would start by saying it is a truly awesome experience for me. I feel so fortunate to be able to be a part of this time in history. And I thank you for inviting me to be a part of this, to be able to lend voice and to tell these stories in the rich history of America. This is a history that until now has not been fully told, has not been fully recognized, and it's a history that we should all know and all be aware of. And it's the history for all Americans. So I'm just grateful to get to be a part of it, and thank you.
Thank you. And Royce?
And I would completely agree. It's not DC history, it's not White House history, it's American history. And so being able to have a voice and be able to tell this story for everyone who visits the park or everyone who listens to it online is just an incredible opportunity and honor that I'm privileged to have, and be able to work with you, Hillary, to be able to tell that story of just history.
Hillary, we recently located some wonderful recordings that your father made in 2010 for the National Trust for Historic Preservation, where he took elements related to African American history from sites around Lafayette Park and recorded those. And it was actually a tour that you could take on a cell phone. And it was wonderful to listen to these, and we shared those with you and your mother. And I'd just like to know what that meant to you to listen to those and to also take part in a project that is a reflection of that work by bringing these waysides to life with your own voice.
Thank you for asking me to be a part of this. I am truly honored to be able to do that, and to be what I would perhaps say following in my father's footsteps makes it even more wonderful for me. So thank you for that. I will say we lost Dad 3 years ago. Would be honored to be able to record these, re-record these with you again. The only thing that would be better, honestly, is if he were here to be able to do that himself. But of course, personally, to be able to hear his voice was just so overwhelming in the most wonderful way. And I cannot thank you enough for being able to share that both with me and my mother.
So, Royce, let's talk about your upbringing. You were born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia.
That's right.
You went to school at the University of Alabama and continue there in your graduate program of business there today. Both places, Atlanta, Alabama, significant sites of race issues and civil rights. And I wonder how it felt to you to bring life to the voice of those largely anonymous by name, but were enslaved, hired from their owners to build the White House. And here you are telling their story and bringing their story to life. That had to be a powerful experience for you.
That's exactly right. Growing up in Atlanta, we have civil rights icons that have gone and brought change throughout our city and throughout the South. But being able to know the history of the White House, what I thought was just the history of the White House, what happened in the building, but more so being able to bring light to the people who built the White House and enslaved or non enslaved, the story that they weren't able to tell. And for us to have that opportunity to tell that story now is an honor that I'll never be able to replicate, and really a privilege that I don't think anything tops this, being able to give voices to the voiceless. I don't think they would have ever imagined, one, that we'd probably have an African American in the White House, let alone have those who were descendants of slaves be able to tell that story for everyone who visits the White House or visits the park.
So let's talk about why people should visit Lafayette Park. What's important? Think of people come to Washington, they want to go see the White House. They'll creep up onto Pennsylvania Avenue and look through those bars and see the White House. Behind them is Lafayette Park. Why is that important, and why should everyone walk across that property and look at that land and think about what took place there?
This is our history. This is a rich history, and it is one that hopefully everybody should know and be able to be a part of. And to your point, visiting Lafayette Park, being able to walk across the park, to be able to see the White House, to be able to listen to these recordings. You can visit from home, you can see things online, but that in-person experience is something that cannot be replicated. And again, this is a history that I just believe is long overdue in being shared. And there is some that I'm sure folks are aware of, and there is history that is very new and has not been told. And so to be able to have this opportunity now to bring life and voice to it means so much.
I mean, I would completely agree with that. Coming to Washington, D.C., it's a place not only where history was created, where history is continually being created. And so being able to stand in front of the White House, not only just have the view of the White House with the Washington Monument behind that, but being able to walk through and see where history continues to be created is incredible.
Well, the purpose of these markers is, people hustle and bustle, crazy Washingtonians going across that park, visitors on their way to the next museum or whatever they're going to see. But we want these waysides to have people pause, read them, listen to the narration there, and understand the history. There's also going to be a QR code so people can take that QR code and listen to it later. And then, of course, as I mentioned in the introduction, you can listen to it on our website as well. Hillary, let's turn to another topic that's part of the Wayside message, and that's the history of protests in the park. The very first took place in 1917, where the suffragists who were demanding the right to vote out in front of the White House for the first time ever. You are a powerful leading woman executive here in Washington. Sharing that message and telling their story had to be meaningful as well.
Absolutely. And to know that that a group of women were the first to organize and protest at the park, I will just say, and not trying to make light, but I'm not surprised. I mean, truly, women can be ahead of their time. So again, another powerful message to be able to tell, and to the point that you make for me personally, as a woman, to know that this is part of the message that we are sharing is just, I don't want to make light, but I'm not surprised, and I am so proud to see that they would gather again to lend voice that really set the stage to everything that we see today.
Royce, part of the story of the Waysides is what Mrs. Kennedy did to save the park, the historic integrity of the park. When the Kennedys came into the presidency, the decision had already been made to raise the historic townhomes on the east and west side of the park and build large government buildings right up onto the park itself. Mrs. Kennedy was influential to have those buildings pressed back, maintain the historic integrity of the park, which you see and enjoy and experience today. The story of what she did with historic preservation at the park, the story of what she did with historic preservation at the White House. We're celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. Amazing to me. Here's a woman who's 31 years old when her husband is elected president of the United States. She's first lady for less than 3 years, but what she put in place is still what governs historic preservation, acquisitions, conservation at the White House today. You are a follower of the White House Historical Association, a very interested person in history itself. Tell us about your thoughts on the mission of the White House Historical Association and why it's important for people to understand and learn about the history of the White House.
I think history and the history that comes with the White House is important, whether it's heads of state and the events that have occurred at the White House, because from there, that changes our entire American landscape. And through you all's work with the preservation of the White House and all that goes inside of it, it's important for us as Americans to be able to have a piece of that. And you all stretch that history out to not just the corners of DC, but beyond that. And that's across the country and across the world. And where now, me sitting in Alabama, I'm able to be a part of that history and learn about it. And the Waysides is just even more of how we can continue to tell that story and share that history with people who are yet to be born yet, because it's not just what we see in the pictures and that view that, thanks to Miss Kennedy, has been saved, but more so what happened within that view that we get to see and experience because of you all's work.
So, Hillary, I mentioned your mom, Gail West, has been on our board for many years, and you probably have heard much about the White House Historical Association. And I remember years ago when I was on the staff at Mount Vernon, and Gail was a member of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association as the vice regent for DC, and now you hold that capacity as well. Tell us your views on the White House Historical Association and what you've heard through your mother, and also what you've seen and observed in your own experience.
The educational resources that you all provide, I think, is something that is so very exceptional, whether it is for us as human beings to educate ourselves, for educators to be able to use in their classrooms to teach students, and particularly in this time that we are in, where there really are a lot of conversations taking place right now and almost challenges to how and to what history we teach. And again, this is history that is for everybody to know.
Well, thank you so much. And I mentioned Mount Vernon, and you are a member of that leadership there. And George Washington, the only president who did not live in the White House, he selected the plot of land. He hired the young Irish designer and builder who built the White House in collaboration with him, but he never did live there. George Washington was a slave owner before, during, and after the presidency. What do you think he would think of us honoring those enslaved people who built the White House?
I think he would be right here with us in the sense that he would be so very supportive and say this is something that is long overdue. He was indeed a slave owner, but also, as we know, his views, I think he struggled with the institution of slavery, and his views changed over the course of his life. And in his will, he freed those slaves upon the death of his wife, and he was our only founding father to do so.
Royce, you are an exception in your peer group, in my view. Most in your generation have little regard for history, too busy doing other things that are about the now or about the next. But yet you have embraced an understanding and appreciation for the importance of studying history, knowing our nation's history. How do you think we can break through to your peer group, and why is that important for them to have a better understanding of our nation's history?
I think it's important to have a better understanding of our nation's history because of history being created all around us. It's up to us to be able to determine what our history will be and how it's written and how it's recorded. And I think we are in a time now where we're seeing revisionists come back and try to highlight parts of our history that we didn't talk about. And that's something that's core to my generation being in a system of education where we're trying to backtrack and go back and recover history that was never told. And I know growing up, there were parts of American history that I've never heard of and parts that I'm hearing about now, today, and last week that were key highlights of American history that they weren't shared. And so I think it's important for us to be able to take that mantle in order to not only preserve that history, but go back and tell stories that should have been told and share those and continue to uncover more stories that we have yet to be discovered.
That's a great answer. You know, one of the things I do love about my job is there's so much to know about White House history. I learn something new every day, and I could work here the rest of my life and not know all there is to know. It's an extraordinary, even though our nation is so young by global standards, so much of American history has taken place through that one house that we call the White House today. Suppose we could bring together 10 or so people for dinner this evening who had been those enslaved people who lived around the park, worked in that spot of land, built that symbol of American freedom and democracy, had no clue that anyone would remember them generations, centuries later. we could have dinner with a group of them tonight and you could listen to them, what do you think they would say? What would you like to say to them, and what would you like to ask them? Royce?
I think one of the things that I would ask them is if they felt that our country would move as far as it had, and what was America for them at that time? America has always been the land of the free, not necessarily for everyone, but for a certain class of people and citizens of our country. But really them getting the opportunity to see how far America has come, acknowledging that, seeing what they would think about that, but also acknowledging what America still has left to do in our history and in our freedom and democracy that we have, being able to look at the White House and know all the events that have occurred outside it. If those walls could talk, they built those walls, and to be able to hear their stories of what that was like and how DC has changed and how our country has changed would most likely be what I would ask them, and it'd just be an incredible table of people just to talk to.
Wow, it sure would. Hillary?
Yeah, I was going to say I would love to, to ask them, what do they think of where we are right now? What do they think that we are at this place where we now have this marker that is telling this story of their lives and their work? Because I can only imagine that was, would they have ever thought that we would get to this place? And to be able to lend voice again to those who did not have a voice, and would just love to know what they think about where we are today. And then I would want to tell them, not just thank you. I think that sounds a little trite, but truly, your lives had meaning. You did so much for this country, and that is a group of people who at the time might have not been,
Right.
Been in that mindset. So it'd be wonderful just to see where they are.
Well, I can't thank you both enough for being a part of this project. It was wonderful to stand in Lafayette Park with you, for us to play the first time and hear that audio of your two voices bringing these stories to life. And to thank you both, and I look forward to following both of your careers and the excitement that you have in store for your lives, and the contributions that you're going to make to our country and to the White House. And maybe one of you will have a real personal stake in White House history one day. We can hope so.
Thank you for allowing us to be a part of this journey, truly.
Thank you. It's our privilege.
Thank you for continuing to share the story.
Great. Thank you so much. And now, stay tuned for the actual audio with Hillary West and Royce Dickerson from the Waysides in historic Lafayette Park.
Construction of the White House. In the center of this panel is an image of Peter Pierre Charles L'Enfant's 1791 plan for the city of Washington. The image shows the president's house and grounds, the space that became the National Mall and the Capitol building. This map is based on an earlier printing of the city plan. At the right end of the panel is a painting by Peter Waddell depicting the 18th century construction processes, materials, and equipment used for the White House. In the foreground is a group which includes White House architect James Hoban, master carpenter Pierce Purcell, and William Thornton, architect and one of the commissioners for the District of Columbia. Enslaved and free workers are illustrated laying bricks and walking on scaffolding. Encampments for free laborers and enslaved labor barracks in current-day Lafayette Park are depicted in the background. The text along the bottom of the panel reads,
On July 16, 1790, Congress passed the Residence Act, establishing a permanent capital for the United States along the Potomac River. President George Washington worked with French engineer Pierre Charles L'Enfant to select the sites for federal buildings, including the White House and the United States Capitol. In 1792, an encampment was built on this land for American, English, Scottish, and Irish wage laborers and craftsmen, along with barracks for enslaved African Americans who were hired out by their owners. These workers, free and enslaved, skilled and unskilled, labored alongside each other for the next 8 years to build the White House. During that time, hundreds of enslaved people were involved in nearly every aspect of construction, including quarrying and transporting stone, cutting timber, producing bricks, and building the walls and roof. Throughout each phase of construction, enslaved and free African Americans worked as axemen, stone cutters, carpenters, brick makers, sawyers, and laborers. The use of enslaved labor to build the home of the President of the United States, often seen as a symbol of democracy, illuminates our country's conflicted relationship with the institution of slavery and the ideals of freedom and equality promised in America's founding documents.
At the left end of the panel, just above the text, is an architectural sketch of the White House. The caption reads, "The North Front of the President's House, Samuel Blodgett Jr., circa 1800. A small gray triangle points from this architectural sketch to the President's house on L'Enfant's plan. Commemoration and preservation. In the center of this panel is a Peter Waddell painting depicting Lafayette Square as it appeared in 1902, facing south. The aerial view includes St. John's Church, Decatur House, Lafayette Park, and the White House. On the left end of the panel is a photograph of First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy. The caption reads, "First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy views a model of Lafayette Square with architect John Carl Warnke, 1962. The text along the bottom of the panel reads,
In 1961, First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy created the White House Fine Arts Committee and the White House Historical Association to restore the White House and preserve its collection of historic furniture, decorative arts, and objects. The following year, she intervened after learning that the historic homes of Lafayette Square were scheduled for demolition. She worked with architect John Carl Warnke to design a square that preserved the 19th century buildings and historical character of the park, while also making room for modern office buildings. In 1970, Lafayette Square Historic District was placed in the National Register of Historic Places. Lafayette Square still features historic buildings such as St. John's Church, Decatur House, the Cutts Madison House, and Blair House, as well as 5 commemorative statues. At the center of the park stands a statue depicting President Andrew Jackson on horseback, which was designed by Clark Mills and dedicated in 1853. 4 additional statues were installed between 1891 and 1910 at each of the square's 4 corners, honoring important international figures who fought in the American Revolution: General Marquis Gilbert de Lafayette, Major General Comte Jean de Rochambeau, General Thaddeus Kouzescu, and Major General Baron Frederick Wilhelm von Steuben. The park was also named in honor of Lafayette, French hero of the American Revolution, after his visit to the United States in 1824 to 1825.
In the top right of the panel is a painting of historic Decatur House, which is located in the northwest corner of Lafayette Park. The painting shows a horse-drawn carriage on the left side and a man exiting the front door of the Decatur House. The caption reads, "This watercolor, Maison du Commodore Stephen Decatur, was painted by Madame E. Vale. Decatur House was the first private residence built on the square in 1818 to 1819. A small gray triangle points from this watercolor to the Decatur House in Peter Waddell's painting. Below that watercolor is a photograph of an aerial view of Lafayette Square during sunset facing southeast. In the foreground is Decatur House and the statue of Major General Baron Frederick Wilhelm von Steuben, who assisted in training American troops during the American Revolutionary War. Below that image is a photograph of Clark Mills's equestrian statue of President Andrew Jackson after a snowstorm in 2002. The statue was created by Mills and his foundry workers, including Philip Reed, an enslaved man who later worked on the Statue of Freedom for the U.S. Capitol. Demonstration. The background of this panel is a photograph of 9 suffragists picketing in front of the White House. Each woman is wearing a sash with the name of an American college or university. A sign on the left reads, "Mr. President, how long must women wait for liberty?" Another sign on the right reads, "Mr. President, what will you do for women's suffrage?" The text along the bottom of the panel reads,
Lafayette Park has long served as a place for political and social demonstrations. People continue to exercise their right of free speech here, using Lafayette Park as a stage and the White House as their audience. Demonstrations often take the form of nighttime vigils, marches, picketing, and other peaceful means of public awareness. One of the most historically significant demonstrations occurred during the fight for women's suffrage. On January 10, 1917, a group of suffragists left the National Women's Party headquarters, located at Cameron House on the eastern side of the square, to promote their cause. The suffragists became the first people to picket the White House. Many suffragists were fined and imprisoned for their actions. Women finally gained the right to vote with the ratification and certification of the 19th Amendment on August 26, 1920. Ever since, people have gathered in Lafayette Park to demonstrate and raise awareness for their cause.
At the top left end of the panel is a photograph of a group of women and children demonstrating for the release of political prisoners in 1922. The group of demonstrators hold signs that read, "Democracy and political prisoners don't mix. Shall justice die? We are innocent victims. We are wives and children of political prisoners." And 4 years since I saw my daddy. The White House is seen in the background of the photograph. Another photograph in the top center of the panel shows African American demonstrators near the White House in 1965. The demonstrators hold signs that read, "We demand the right to vote, everywhere." There are also signs protesting police brutality against civil rights demonstrators in Selma, Alabama. At the top right end of the panel is a photograph of Vietnam War demonstrators outside the White House in the summer of 1966. A banner reads, "We mourn our soldiers. They are dying in vain. Only Americans can stop it." In the bottom right of the panel is a photograph of demonstrators protesting police brutality following the death of George Floyd in 2020. The foreground features demonstrators with their hands in the air. The White House is visible in the background of the photograph. The top of the Washington Monument is illuminated behind the White House.
Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you next time at the 1600 Sessions.